David Smith had always been a bright kid, the kind of student who made teachers beam with pride and classmates envy his effortless brilliance. A tech graduate from a prestigious university, David was the kind of man destined for greatness, or so it seemed. The day he graduated, his parents wept tears of joy. David stood in front of the computer science building, clutching his cap, smiling as the golden sunlight kissed his face. He felt on top of the world, ready to take on the tech industry and make his mark. Yet beneath his promising exterior, something darker stirred. David's first job out of college was at a mid-sized tech firm. The pay was decent and the work was challenging, but David grew restless. His sharp mind craved excitement, and the monotony of debugging lines of code left him feeling empty. It wasn't long before he began exploring less-than-legal opportunities online. At first it was small, playing around with harmless scripts, poking into unsecured systems just to prove he could. But what started as curiosity soon became an obsession. He stumbled into forums filled with anonymous users trading tips on phishing scams, identity theft, and laundering money. "This is the real Wild West," David murmured one night, scrolling through a thread about scamming delivery drivers. His laptop screen illuminated his face in the otherwise dark room, his lips curling into a sly smile. It started small, a fake website here, a phishing email there. David found he had a knack for creating scams that fooled even the most cautious people. But it wasn't enough. He wanted more. One day, as he researched vulnerabilities in gig economy platforms, an idea sparked. DoorDash drivers, often juggling multiple apps, could easily fall victim to a phishing scheme. He created fake login pages for DoorDash, tricking drivers into entering their credentials. From there, it was a simple matter of rerouting their earnings to his accounts. His room became his headquarters, a chaotic mess of monitors, papers, and devices. The glow of his screens reflected in his sharp blue eyes as he watched the money roll in. "This is it," he whispered to himself. "Easy money, no risk." But David underestimated the consequences. David's personal life was unraveling as fast as his schemes were succeeding. His girlfriend Sarah, who was 6 months pregnant, had grown tired of his secrecy and erratic behavior. "David," she said one evening, standing in the cluttered living room of their apartment, "what is going on with you? You're always locked in that room. You barely talk to me anymore." David, hunched over his laptop, didn't look up. "I'm working, Sarah. You know that." "Working? Don't insult my intelligence. I've seen the bank statements. Where is all this money coming from?" David slammed his laptop shut and stood abruptly. "Mind your own business. I'm doing what I need to do for us, for our baby." "For us?" Sarah's voice cracked. "You're lying to me, David. I can't live like this." Fuming, she grabbed her phone and stormed out of the apartment after the argument turned physical. The physical altercation led Sarah to call the police, worried about the safety of her unborn child. When officers arrived at the apartment, they found more than they bargained for. "Ma'am, we're going to need to search the premises," one officer said after hearing Sarah's concerns. Within minutes, the officers uncovered stacks of cash, multiple cell phones, fake IDs, and notebooks filled with login credentials. David was cuffed and led out of the apartment, his face a mask of anger and defeat. As the officers bagged the evidence, one turned to the other. "This isn't just a domestic dispute. We've got ourselves a full-blown cybercrime operation here." They whisked David off to jail with charges pending. David sat in the stark confines of a jail cell, his mind racing. He replayed every decision, every misstep, wondering where it all went wrong. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered to himself, staring at the grey walls. "I was smarter than this." His lawyer had warned him that the evidence was damning. The prosecution was building a strong case, and the trial was only weeks away, in which David was out on bond. David's downfall wasn't just due to his recklessness. Among his victims was a man named Marcus, a hardened ex-con who had turned to gig work to rebuild his life. When Marcus discovered his paycheck had been stolen, he vowed revenge. "This guy thinks he can mess with me?" Marcus growled, staring at the fake DoorDash login page. "He doesn't know who he's dealing with." Marcus tracked David down through dark web forums, piecing together clues from his online activity. David sat on the worn leather couch in his dimly lit apartment, flipping through television channels without really watching. Because of his strict bond restrictions, he had nowhere to go and no one left to turn to. The silence in the apartment was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the old building settling. The blinds were tightly shut and the locks on the door had been reinforced after his release. He'd become paranoid, constantly looking over his shoulder. The threats he had received online and the whispers of anger from his victims haunted him. "I'm safe here." he muttered to himself, trying to believe the words. Nobody knows where I live. But David underestimated the reach of those he had wronged. It started with a knock at the door. Not a friendly knock, but a sharp, deliberate rapping that sent a jolt of fear through him. "Who is it?" David called out, his voice cracking slightly. No response. The air grew thick with tension as David's pulse quickened. He crept toward the door and peered through the peephole. All he could see was the distorted image of a hallway light. No one was there. David hesitated, his hand hovering over the doorknob. "Maybe it's just the neighbors," he whispered. As he turned to walk away, the sound of splintering wood shattered the silence. The door flew open, the locks snapping like twigs. A masked figure stepped into the apartment, dressed in dark clothes, a pistol held tightly in their hand. David stumbled back, his hands raised. "Wait! Wait! What do you want?" "I've got money. I'll pay you." The intruder didn't speak. Instead, they aimed the gun and fired. Bang! The bullet tore into David's shoulder, sending him crashing into the coffee table. He groaned in pain, clutching his arm as blood soaked his shirt. "Please," David cried, crawling backward toward the wall. "I'll do anything. Don't kill me." The figure stepped closer, their voice cold and steady. "You scammed the wrong person, David. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" David shook his head frantically. "It wasn't personal. I didn't know who you were." Another gunshot rang out. This time the bullet struck his chest. David gasped, his body collapsing against the wall. His breath came in shallow, ragged gasps as he tried to speak, but no words came out. The figure loomed over him for a moment, their face hidden behind the mask. Without another word, they turned and walked out, leaving the apartment door swinging open behind them. David lay there, the room spinning around him, his vision blurred as the blood pooled beneath him. Memories of his life flashed before his eyes. His graduation day, Sarah's tearful face, the stacks of stolen cash on his desk. As his life slipped away, a bitter realization struck him. The shortcuts, the lies, the greed, it had all led to this. By the time the police arrived, responding to a neighbor's frantic 911 call, David Smith was gone. The once promising tech graduate who had traded his future for a life of crime now lay lifeless in his own apartment, a victim of the very deceit he had built his life upon. For David, there would be no trial, no redemption, only the silence of a tragic, self-inflicted end. News of David's death spread quickly, adding a grim layer to an already sordid tale. His story became a cautionary tale of ambition turned greed, of a young man with a bright future who gambled it all for quick riches. As reporters covered his death, one newscaster remarked, "The scammer scammed himself out of life. A tragic end to a brilliant, misguided mind." David's life, once so full of promise, had become a cautionary tale etched in irony and regret.